Well, welcome back, folks. Today's video might be a little bit shorter than my typical 15 to 20 minute weekly videos. We'll have to see how it goes here. We're going to talk about, obviously, the powder coating for the Suzuki TS50 restoration project. Also, you might hear a little bit of noise in the background. It is raining and sleeting out today, quite hard actually. It's actually a terrible day weather-wise outside. And you might hear some of the pitter-patter of the sleet and the rain against the garage door on the outside, just obviously in the background there, so just be aware of that. The powder coating for the Suzuki TS50 restoration project, you can see in front of you, it's all done. I got it back a couple of days ago. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. Some of this we have been through before, such as the steel rear inner fender right here that I had to do some repair on. The foot peg bar right here that I had to straighten, etc. So I'm not going to go through that in any great detail here, but rather I want to talk about the powder coating itself, the process, and the preparation. All of the parts here on the shot, with the exception of the frame, I stripped myself in my blast cabinet. Now that was originally a lacquer-based paint, so it stripped real easily with my media blast cabinet. If it was powder coat, it would not have come off nearly as easily. You almost have to use a chemical process to remove powder coat. It is that tough. But all the smaller parts, including the swing arm over here, I could get, in fact, in my media blast cabinet. And I used crushed coal slag, different brand names for it. I think they call it Black Beauty, Black Diamond. Those are all different trade names for the same product. And that's usually what I use when I'm stripping steel, which all of these parts are. The frame itself, obviously I wasn't able to get into my cabinet, so what I did is I took that down to a local being, he's probably 30 miles from me, fabrication shop that rents time to the public on their medium blast cabinets, and they have very large dual operator setup where two people can blast at the same time. They use, I believe, aluminum oxide in their cabinet. It's a very large commercial unit. It's got a lot of power to it. They rent or lease time on that by the hour, and I think it's $18 an hour to put your part in there, and it's a do-it-yourself kind of thing. They just point you towards it, start the clock, and when you're done, you pay whatever for whatever time you've accumulated. So I ran down here a week or so ago and blasted that frame myself. The total charge, time on the cabinet was $10, so obviously it was probably just a little over half an hour, 35 minutes maybe, and I stripped that frame myself, and it was stripped very easily. There was no issues with it whatsoever. None of these parts are difficult to strip because the stock paint on these, let's be honest, wasn't the greatest in the world. So once I had all the parts collected, I called around to the different powder coaters that I use. Now, let me explain a little bit why I had all of this commercially powder coated. Some of you know that I, in fact, can powder coat myself. I do have my own powder coating setup. I have a little oven in my shop. It's a 30-inch kitchen, electric kitchen range size, so I'm limited by the footprint of the part. And about the largest part out of this set that I could get into my oven would be that swing arm. I think I could have gotten all the parts but the frame into the oven. The frame clearly wouldn't fit. Since I was going to have the frame powder coated professionally anyway, I thought it'd be easiest all the way around, and there's not much difference in cost. I'll come back to the cost in a minute. It'd be easiest all the way around to take all 12 of these parts, and there are 12 pieces, take them all into the powder coater, have them do them all at once in the same powder, same gloss, and just be done with it, rather than having a professional do the frame. Then I would do everything else myself, which I could do, of course, but it was easiest just to take it all off, get it done, bring it back, and here you go. So I called around to do 2 or 3 different powder coaters I've used in the past. One of them, 2 of them weren't really, to be honest, wild about doing it. They're commercial coaters, and they would have if I pushed the point, but 2 of the 3 were a little ambivalent about the project. The third was more than happy to do it. I've used him before. In fact, he was the one I used on the Suzuki TS185 project. And he's located about 25 miles from me or so-ish. And he was happy to do it. So the only thing is he doesn't do any blasting at all. So I knew going in I had to strip all of this myself. So I stripped it, and then within 1 or 2 days I got it off to the powder coater. When I took it in, I explained to him, and he asked, normally most coaters will, what is it you need to have masked and protected from the powder? And I said the stem on the frame right here at the top, where the bearings for the steering stem fit in, which he was aware of that issue. Obviously he's done frames before. He did a frame for me a few years back. Said I needed that masked or protected, and then I needed the stem itself from the steering stem right here, and you can see I think the shiny spots, as well as go a little lighter on the steering head itself, where the serial number, frame serial number, is stamped into the frame. I didn't want that filled in with powder, so go a little lighter there. Well, he did about 50% of what I asked. He did mask off the steering stem and didn't powder coat where the bearings, or the races for the bearings fit. And he was reasonably light on not filling in the serial number on the frame. A little heavier than what I probably would have preferred, but you can still read the serial number stamped into that tube right there. What he didn't do at all is mask that steering stem. Now, that stem that comes up through that tube, and there's bearings and races, you can't have powder where the bearing races fit. And it was totally coated. The silver, or the shiny part, which is where I've taken the powder coating off, I did myself. When I pointed it out to the powder coater, he felt bad about it. He said, oops, kind of thing. And he was willing to take that part, strip it, and then recoat it. But it would have taken a couple of days, of course. And I said, no, I'm not going to deal with that. That would mean I would have to do another round trip of 50 plus miles and take a couple more days and mess around. I said, no, I'll fix it myself. So what I did is strip the powder coat from the threads right here, where there's that big nut that fits on the top to pull that assembly together. I stripped that myself. In the lower end here where the bearing race fits. And let's take a little bit closer look. So there's the stem up close, and here is the lower bearing race. Now this bearing race fits down, right down in here. Something like, it's a press fit. And typically what I do is I will heat this race up, and this is the original, and I think I indicated before I'm going to reuse this. I will heat this up in my oven, and I will probably put this piece in the freezer, the house freezer, for 24 hours or so, because I want this to shrink, I want this to expand. And then often you can just get these things to just slide back together, or I might have to use a driver of some kind to force it back into position. That's normal. I would fully expect that. What I had to do was, and I had taped this all off with just blue masking tape. In fact, you can see some of the adhesive, I think, right there where my finger is, my thumb is. This doesn't make any difference whether it's powder coated or not. That's irrelevant. It's a material. But these threads here, you can see where I just took it over to I first wrapped it with electrical, or rather blue masking tape, not electrical tape. I don't know where that came from. And then I just took over the grinder and removed the powder coat, because this is completely powder coated. And then on the inside, there's a threaded section where that bolt comes down through. I think it's chrome on this bike, and pulls the assembly together. I ran a bolt down through there and cleaned that out. There wasn't a lot of powder down in there, I wouldn't expect given the shape of it. That cleaned up really easy. Where I had to put a little more effort was cleaning this up. And again, right there, you can see where this inner side of the race, if I can get that right there, fits down over. It won't fit right now, of course. I'll have to install it like I talked about a moment ago. So I had to clean this all up. And the way I did that is I masked everything up really well. And then I used my Dremel with a little wire brush and got most of the powder off here all the way around. And then I used a little thin strip of 220 grit emery paper, and I just worked it back and forth around this edge right here. This you can see this was at a little less than 6 millimeters, probably 5 millimeters or so. You can see I nicked the stem right there. It's not a big deal because again, this isn't normally painted or finished anyway. And I just cleaned the powder off with some 220 grit and my Dremel with a little wire brush in it, and it cleaned up pretty well. So I'm happy with it, the way it turned out. I shouldn't have had to do that, but again, given the circumstances, I was not going to mess around taking it back and having him do it all over again. The other option would have been to completely strip this myself, and I do have a chemical stripper that would remove this. I could have stripped it myself completely, masked, and then dried it, remasked it myself, and repowder coated it myself. But I thought I would take this approach first and see how well I could do it. It turned out fine, so I'm satisfied with that. So that was probably the biggest disappointment, I would say, in this job. Other than that, the quality of the work is fine. He did a great job. Turnaround time I was very impressed with. I dropped this off on a Thursday morning, early, and I picked it up the following Monday morning, mid-morning. He called me Monday morning and said it was done. So when you think about that, that's a 2-day to business day turnaround. And so I asked him about that. I said, well, normally it's a week or so, 5, 6 days, a week, 10 days. He said, well, he powder coats high gloss black all the time. It's a very common color for him. And he just slipped this in when he was powder coating some other items that were going to be the same color, and he ran it right through. So 48-hour business or 2 business day turnaround I thought was quite impressive, and the quality seems to be just fine outside of this this little oversight on their part. A couple other things I want to share with you is the inside of some of these parts. Powder coating the inside of a container like that, and that's essentially what that is. This is the air cleaner housing, air filter housing. Getting powder in there effectively can be a challenge due to a phenomenon called the Faraday effect. And if you're not familiar with what that is, I would encourage you to look it up, do an online search, and you'll find it without any problem whatsoever. I'm not going to go through in great detail what that is here today, but due to that Faraday effect, getting powder down in there can be challenging. The same with this battery box. Getting powder down inside of there into all those crevices can create a challenge. And there's techniques one can use. I think I've even talked about it in previous videos of my own when I powder coated about the Faraday effect. But they did a very good job completely coating these parts. And they're all very similar, whichever one of these you would look at. This canister for the air cleaner and this battery box are probably the 2 worst in terms of overcoming the Faraday effect. That's why I'm showing these to you. The rest of these parts here are in fine shape in terms of the powder. There's minimal orange peeling. There is even coating. If anything, he might have gone a touch on the heavy side, but that's commercial painters. That's kind of what they do. I probably, if I was painting it, coating it myself, I would have gone a little lighter on the powder, but it's okay. It'll be fine for my purposes. In terms of cost, this entire set of parts, all 12 of them, was $150 US out the door, which I thought was quite reasonable as well. So I was quite happy with that. So next step for this is, for all practical purposes, I think what's going to happen, I'm just going to set most of these pieces aside right now. I don't really need them yet. Next steps would be to get to the engine, which I have not even touched yet. I've got to sort out the chrome, getting that organized and getting that off to a chrome shop. Not a real rush on the chrome, I don't think, right now, but I got this done. I'm just going to set it aside in a safe place in the shop for now. And later on, especially when it comes to fitting the bearings into the steering stem, that'll probably be the first thing that will go together on the frame, get it back up on the lift, and we'll start reassembling the bike. But before I get to that, I've got to do some work on the frame, or rather on the engine, get that stripped, decide what I'm going to do in terms of repairing or restoring, rebuilding, whatever I'm going to do with the frame yet. And some videos, I have not started as of this shooting today. I've not started on the engine yet, so that will be coming up here fairly soon, I think, in terms of the series of the videos. But these parts are just going to now be set aside and in a safe spot, and then I'll come back to them a little bit later on. So that's the story on the powder coating. It's all done. If I was to run into anything now that I forgot in my batch of parts, set it aside, missed it for powder coating at this point, I will powder coat it myself, because I can do anything smaller than that frame, and I'm sure anything I run into now is going to be smaller than the frame, so I will just take care of that myself in the future if I was to run into it. I think I got everything captured here, but even if I didn't and I missed something, I can pick that up later on my own. So we're going to call this video a wrap today, folks. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.